Hello, it's Randi Rhodes. Here's a clip from our show, and go to randyrhodes.com for the whole thing and a podcast. Buy a stinking podcast.
Mary had a little man.
The fault. We believe that all men are created equal.
To the magnificent mosaic that is America.
From radio beacon to radio beacon.
I have a dream.
Change has come to America.
Knock, knock. Who's there?
It's a figment of your imagination.
Randi Rhodes Show. Turn up your mind.
And by the way, folks, just in case you're curious, no, Russia did not help me. Okay? Russia. I call it the Russian hoax. One of the great hoaxes. Actually, that's the thing I was thinking about. That's the thing that the Democrats did best. They lost the election, and they didn't know what happened. And they needed an excuse. So they said, Russia. And then they said, wait a minute, Russia. And Trump, honestly, it's the thing they did best. They did a rotten job of running. But to convince people about this hoax, that was probably the thing that they did best. But it is one great hoax. No, Russia did not help me. That I can tell you, okay? Any Russians in the audience? Are there any Russians in the audience, please? I don't see too many Russians. I didn't see too many Russians in Pennsylvania. I didn't see too many Russians.
Oh, see, now that is the problem for him, isn't it? Oh, it's Friday, you bastards. Very excited about this Friday. I was saying to Scotty on our morning phone call today that it's Friday, and I expect a Friday news dump, and I do expect somebody's going to get fired tonight. I'm not sure if it's going to be Chris Wray over at the FBI, and they'll blame it now on the fact that the FBI was tipped off by somebody in Parkland, somebody that knew this kid, Nick Cruz, and called into the FBI with very specific information about him, about his guns, about his social media posts, about that. So I don't know if they're going to use this as an excuse to fire Chris Wray. I suspect that Kelly's going to go. I don't know if they've, talked anybody into sacrificing their soul to go to work for the Trump administration in place of John Kelly. But I suspected this morning that it would be John Kelly. But then all of a sudden the news shifted, and it looks like maybe Chris Wray, at the behest of our governor here in Florida, one of the biggest Medicare fraudsters in the history of the universe, certainly in our country. Our Governor Rick Scott is calling on Chris Wray to resign today because he missed, because the FBI didn't follow up on a tip. And that tip, obviously was very, very important because people were screaming and yelling about this kid being ready to do something, being armed and dangerous, being erratic, being on their radar, being somebody that they suspected would end up being a school shooter. So maybe Chris Wray tonight, maybe John Kelly tonight. But in the meantime, another story broke. And I feel bad for our kids in Parkland because they're going to take a back seat to this for a little while. I'm sure they will make it to the Sunday shows, though. I'm sure they will. And they'll make it on this show today because I want you to understand what happened to the Second Amendment, when it happened to the Second Amendment, and arm them with what you need to have when you're going to a gunfight. And it's called information, and it's very important that they get this. Anyway, Robert Mueller this morning, through Rod Rosenstein, indicted 13 Russian nationals and 3 Russian companies who obviously interfered in the U.S. election and used everything and every source and method that they could to influence the U.S. electoral process favoring one Donald Trump. They wanted to infect the United States and the electoral process because they favored Donald Trump. That is the conspiracy that Robert Mueller was able to show today. That was the conspiracy he was able to indict on. The indictment clearly calls this a conspiracy. Now, why are these words important? These words are important because now that Robert Mueller has proven the underlying crime, which Trump has denied repeatedly and refuses to protect and defend us against the crime that is ongoing. It's ongoing. You know, we just heard testimony the other day from all the intelligence agencies saying America is under attack. Yes, it's ongoing. Did the president instruct you to do anything specific to stop the threat? No, but we're doing it anyway. Right? So we have all that. So you have the president refusing to act against a organized criminal conspiracy to infect and to interfere in U.S. elections. And it is ongoing, and that is what this says. It says it started in 20... I'll read you the exact quote from the indictment. It says, from in or around 2014 to the present. Do I have to keep going? No, I really don't, because that is the conspiracy. He said from in or around 2014 to the present, defendants, which are these 13 Russian nationals who, by the way, were hackers. That's who they are. And some of them were organizers of hackers. Some of them, and they were so organized. I mean, this conspiracy was well conceived. The conspiracy included visits to the United States, posing as, organizations, doing research on right-wing groups, bonding with these right-wing groups, secured borders was one, woke Americans was another one, to suppress the vote for Hillary. All these things happen. But anyway, from in or around 2014 to the present, defendants knowingly and intentionally conspired, hence a conspiracy, with each other and with persons, and this is important, and with persons known and unknown to the grand jury, which means people who have been brought in front of Mueller's grand jury and some who haven't been brought in front of Mueller's grand jury, which could be anybody who's not been brought in front of the grand jury for questioning. It could be Donald Trump himself, couldn't it? People who are known to the grand jury, meaning it wasn't these Russian nationals who are known to the grand jury, all right, because they weren't here. They're not here. They're in Russia. And we are going to seek extradition and blah, 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 and Russia will say no. But the reason why this is important is because it is a conspiracy. So here's what I found the most telling is this little section here. And I can go through some of the other things that the media thought was, the regular media thought was interesting. But this is what really stuck out to me. And if you're following along, the indictment is, this is page 1 at the very bottom in section 2. From in or around 2014 to the present, defendants knowingly and intentionally conspired with each other and with persons known and unknown to the grand jury to defraud the United States by impairing, obstructing, and defeating the lawful functions of the government through fraud and deceit for the purpose of interfering with the U.S. political and electoral processes, including the presidential election of 2016. So it goes on to say that they chose Donald Trump, that they supported Donald Trump, that the Russian government was in support, and that they were funneling money to these hackers, and that these groups and these Facebook pages and these Twitter accounts were all designed to, and I'm quoting, attract U.S. audiences. These groups and pages which address divisive U.S. political and social issues falsely claimed to be controlled by U.S. activists when in fact they were controlled by the defendants, which is the Russians. Defendants also used stolen identities of real U.S. persons to post on organizations' controlled social media accounts. Over time, these social media accounts became defendants' means to reach significant numbers of Americans for purposes of interfering with the U.S. political system, including the presidential election of 2016. Defendant organization had a strategic goal to sow discord in the U.S. political system, i.e., elections are rigged. It's all a rigged system. Remember that? Mm-hmm. In the U.S. political system, including the 2016 U.S. presidential elections, defendants posted derogatory information about a number of candidates, and by early to mid-2016, defendants' operations included supporting the presidential campaign of then candidate Donald J. Trump, Trump campaign, and disparaging Hillary Clinton. Goes on to say that they bought political ads on social media and that they staged political rallies inside the United States, and they were posing as grassroots organizations and entities and U.S. persons without revealing their Russian identities, except for the ones that reached out to me because they were writing in Cyrillic. So, but why is this important? Okay, this is important because Donald Trump covered all this up by denying that it even happened. Donald Trump asked the Russians, Russia, if you're listening, I'd really like to know about the Hillary Clinton emails. Junior was in contact with WikiLeaks and saying that he was willing and loved the idea of receiving the stolen goods from the Russians, and that WikiLeaks acted as the vessel. But this particular indictment doesn't go into any of this. This particular indictment is focused on the Russian conspiracy to support Donald Trump and interfere in the U.S. elections. Now, what's very, very important that you understand is that you don't have to know the people involved in a conspiracy. You don't have to monitor the conspiracy. You don't have to communicate with the conspirators. All you have to do is take some action, any action, to cover up the conspiracy, to deny the conspiracy, or to promote the conspiracy. And Donald Trump has done all three. He has denied the conspiracy repeatedly. He has encouraged the conspiracy by saying, Russia, if you're listening. And he has sought to obstruct an investigation into the conspiracy by telling Lester Holt that the reason why he fired Comey was because of this Russia thing.
I was going to fire Comey. There's no good time to do it, by the way.
Because in your letter you said I
around.
accepted their recommendation.
Yeah, well,
so you
also
had already made the decision.
I was going to fire regardless of recommendation.
So there was really
he made a recommendation. He's highly respected, very good guy, very smart guy. The Democrats like him, the Republicans like him. He made a recommendation, but regardless of recommendation, I was going to fire Comey, knowing there was no good time to do it. And in fact, when I decided to just do it, I said to myself, I said, this Russia thing with Trump and Russia is a made-up story. It's an excuse by the Democrats for having lost an election that they should have won. And the reason they should have won it is the Electoral College is almost impossible for a Republican to win. Very hard, because you start off at such a disadvantage. So everybody was thinking they should have won the election. This was an excuse for having lost an election.
See, I told you that was kryptonite. I just knew it. The day he said it, I knew that if anybody looked into it, that particular admission would be obstruction of justice. And now we have the underlying crime. We have an indictment. We have a conspiracy. Anyone who worked to hide, encourage, or conceal this conspiracy is a co-conspirator. And Trump did all three of those things. I think Mueller released all this today so that everybody would know that there is a conspiracy, that Trump was covering it up or just, lying about its existence, and that he knew when he fired Comey that he was firing Comey because Comey was conducting a counterintelligence investigation into a Russian conspiracy to help Trump. Trump doubled down and said, Russia never helped me. And Russia, if you're listening, right?
Clear for takeoff. Randi Rhodes Air Force. Air Force. RandiRhodes.com.
Hey everybody, it's Brett from the Randi Rhodes Show. Independent media is the future, and Randi's leading the way. And it's ironic, the more freedom she gained, the more expensive it got. It's crucial now, more than ever, to keep this show pure and free of corporate influence so Randi can tell the hard truths. The first step to change is an unbiased media, and for that, we need your help. So please, go to RandiRhodes.com/support and subscribe, you bastards.
Gobble, gobble. It's time for more turkey. Oh, yeah. All natural turkey jerky from Herky Jerky. That has been a hit, ever since they introduced it in late 2017, that turkey jerky, because it's got no nitrates, no artificial ingredients, no MSG, preservatives, and no fat. The turkey jerky is the perfect snack any time of day. And, oh my God, it's absolutely delicious. It's bite-sized pieces of fresh turkey. It's meat that tastes just like the oven-roasted bird that you had on Thanksgiving. It's got just the right amount of everything: salt, smoke, flavoring, and spices. It's unlike anything you've ever had, and they don't skimp. They're going to send you a 14-ounce bag that is going to keep you munching for a long time. Nothing like those wimpy 3-ounce gas station bags. And all this month, $6 off every bag of turkey jerky, and there is no promo code needed. So you get free shipping with 2 bags or more of anything you order in the Herky Jerky store, including Smokies, bacon, beef, buffalo, elk, and venison jerky and sticks. February is the perfect time. Stock up on all the delicious products from Herky Jerky, especially the scrumptious turkey jerky. Order it today at herkyjerky.com.
You're listening to the Progressive Voices Network, and here's a clip from Tara Buster with comedian Tara Devlin from RDTDaily.com.
At this point, the way I'm looking at it, all Republicans are traitors. Okay? If you're in bed with anti-democratic foreign dictators, now allowing people who had a hand in undermining our election, and they're blocked from coming into the United States under sanctions, and you waltz them through the front door of the White House, you're an effing traitor. And if you are an average American idiot who is supporting that, you are also a traitor. Okay? You're a traitor. So I've taken to calling Republicans traitors. They're traitors. What does it take? How many Benghazi hearings did we have? How many times did I have to hear about Hillary's email server? So much so that I wake up screaming in the middle of the night about her private server. That's okay? Could you imagine if Barack Obama waltzed in through the front door of the White House, anybody, pick somebody that right-wingers have a problem with. That's not even a problem. They should have a problem with this. They should have a problem with a anti-democratic dictator pulling the strings of our so-called president. This is Tara Devlin from RDTDaily.com. That was a clip from my show, Tara Buster, recorded live every Saturday evening on the RDT Daily Facebook page and streamed simultaneously on YouTube and Facebook Live. Replayed Sunday, 6 p.m. Eastern on Progressive Voices, or anytime on demand on the Progressive Voices app. Support RDT Daily and the Progressive Voices Network. Remember, we stick together, we win.
All things Randy at RandiRhodes.com.
Go for launch.
Speaking truth to power, the Randi Rhodes Show.
Which is about an underlying crime. And of course, this is major that we have now proof of an underlying crime, but I want to point out that impeachment does not require an underlying crime. There's no evidence that Richard Nixon knew anything about the break-in at the DNC in the Watergate office building. What is known is that he obstructed justice, and we have plenty of evidence of obstruction of justice by Trump and the White House and all his staff. So we don't really need proof of this, but it is definitely better from a prosecution standpoint to have that proof, and now we have it.
Ken Delaney, and I'll turn to you once again here. You're making your way through this indictment here. What does the indictment say in particular here? What does it allege about what a role the Trump campaign may have played in all of this? How much is the Trump campaign invoked in the document that we see before us here in these 37 pages?
I haven't read every word, David, but as far as I can tell, it does not address that crucial question. And I was told by Justice Department officials that any Americans mentioned in this have played an unwitting role in this interference effort. What it does lay out, though, is a very complex conspiracy, and it even shows that, for example, once the Russians realized the FBI were onto them, they started covering their tracks and destroying evidence. And the reason the conspiracy is important, as Jill will know, is that now that there is a conspiracy, any act acts in furtherance of the conspiracy can be charged, and that could extend to Americans and people who are not named in this indictment. So it's a very important legal issue here that the government is alleging a massive and complex conspiracy by these Russians to interfere in the 2016 presidential election.
Seth Waxman, let me have you comment on that. I'll bring in Jill Wine-Banks on the heels of that as well. Just pick up on what Ken Delaney just said there about the role of the alleged conspiracy.
Well, yeah, to the fact that there's a conspiracy in place, it's exactly right. Any acts that are in furtherance of that conspiracy can be charged, and anyone that participated in that conspiracy intentionally and knowingly can also be charged. They don't have to participate in every single aspect of that conspiracy. As long as they participated knowingly in some aspect of the conspiracy, they can be brought in. So a conspiracy charge is an incredibly powerful tool for federal prosecutors. And it
is also true that in an indictment, a criminal indictment, and now this is assuming that everyone can get past that the president can be indicted, which I believe is actually the case, and there is a lot of support for that. We chose in Watergate to name the president as an unindicted co-conspirator and to provide a roadmap to Congress for impeachment. But if you indict him, then he only has to participate in any one act in furtherance of any conspiracy, and he is guilty of the entire conspiracy. That is true of every participant in the conspiracy. So you don't have to, as Seth said, you don't have to even know who the other participants are. All you have to do is do one thing in furtherance of it, deliberately doing that.
Russia, if you're listening, we'd like to know where the 30,000 emails. Russia, if you're listening, that was deliberate. That was an invitation to Russia. It also indicated he knew that Russia was acting on his behalf and he wanted more help from them. And now we know even more because we know that Don Jr. was in touch with WikiLeaks, and WikiLeaks was offering dirt on Hillary Clinton. And Jr.'s response to that was, if it's what you say it is, I love it. And a meeting did occur at Trump Tower. And a meeting did occur in order to further the receipt of stolen, hacked Russian conspiracy materials and transferred to the, there was an attempt to transfer those materials to the Trump campaign to the point where that happened, June 9th? And then Donald Trump gets on the stage and says, on Monday, I'm going to have so much dirt on Hillary Clinton. And the only reason why that press conference where he was going to release the dirt, the stolen goods that he got from this Russian conspiracy of hacking, the only reason why that did not happen is because that day, that Monday, was the Pulse nightclub shooting. We've had some of the worst mass shootings under, this president. It's just, we had Pulse, we've had Las Vegas, now we've had the Parkland School, Marjorie Stoneman Douglas. It's just, this man is completely, off his rocker. There's just no question. Anyway, the some of the groups that were retweeted by Kellyanne Conway, that were retweeted by Donald Trump Jr. is a Twitter account, a handle. It's called @10GOP, and it was pretending to be the Tennessee's GOP. It was pretending to be the U.S. state's political party. It was pretending to be the Tennessee GOP, and they had 100,000 online followers. Kellyanne Conway retweeted them. Don Jr. retweeted them. Plenty of people retweeted them in the Trump campaign. I'm so sorry, but there are things that you can. We knew this a long time ago. That story was broken back in October of 2017, and we were collecting stories. And the dossier is right here. This is the dossier printed out on my printer. And what does the dossier say? It says it has evidence of an extensive conspiracy between campaign team and Kremlin, sanctioned at the highest levels, involving Russian diplomatic staff based in the U.S. And this is what this document, proves, that there was a conspiracy that was, based in St. Petersburg, Russia, that was controlled by the Kremlin, that was funded by the Kremlin's chef, which Bill Browder tipped us off to way back when we interviewed Bill Browder. And Bill Browder said, you really need to pay attention to the Kremlin chef. And it turns out that Concord, which is the name of one of his catering companies, was where the money was going for disbursement to these trolls, to these Russian hackers, to this translation team, to the graphic artists that were creating websites like Secure Borders and Blacktivist and all these things. All these things. They had every kind of, and so it was, directed by the Kremlin, and it was carried out, by the Kremlin, and it was based in St. Petersburg. It was one of the companies internet services that we knew. They were talking to people in Texas. They were talking to people in New York. They were talking to people in Florida. They were talking to people all over the place. All over the place. They say that the people that the Russians were speaking to did not know that they were speaking to Russians, but I just, it doesn't matter. What matters is what did the campaign do, and the campaign took a lot of steps. The campaign said, Russia, if you're listening, I'd like to know where the 30,000 emails are. The campaign said Russia is a hoax over and over again. The president said that he fired Comey because of this Russia thing. Then the president had the Russians into the Oval Office without, the proper personnel in the office. He divulged classified information that we got from Israel to the Russians. Obviously, it had to do with Syria. And he also said that Comey was a nut job and that he needed to fire him because the pressure from the Russia investigation was too much for him. And it got rid of the pressure when he fired Comey, he thought. So the president is completely and utterly guilty of being a co-conspirator because he did everything to promote the conspiracy, everything to deny the conspiracy, everything to cover it up.
Russia is fake news. The entire thing has been a witch hunt. Fake news. Fabricated deal. Trump and Russia is a made-up story. It's an excuse. You can talk all you want about Russia, which was all a, fake news, fabricated deal to try and make up for the loss of the Democrats, and the press plays right into it.
You know which hashtags? This was interesting to me. You know which hashtags were created by the Russians? MAGA. Oh, wow, right? MAGA, yeah. MAGA was created by the Russians. Trump 2016 was created by the Russians. Trump Train, created by the Russians. I Won't Protect Hillary, didn't really take off. Hillary for Prison. And then, of course, you have Flynn with the lock her up stuff, right? You even had March for Trump was created by the Russians. You had Trumpsters United created by the Russians. You had volunteers and supporters of the Trump campaign. I'm reading this from the indictment. Defendants and their co-conspirators also used false U.S. personas to communicate with unwitting members, volunteers, and supporters of the Trump campaign involved in local community outreach, as well as grassroots groups that supported then candidate Trump. These individuals and entities at times distributed the organization's materials through their own accounts via retweets, reposts, and similar means. Defendants and their co-conspirators then monitored the propagation of the content through such participants. This is interesting about minority groups, how the voter suppression effort worked. In or around the latter half of 2016. Oh, and by the way, Idiot Boy, what did he tweet? He said this all happened in 2014? No, it began in 2014. He said, Russia started their anti-U.S. campaign in 2014, long before I announced that I would run for president, and long after you visited Moscow. He said the results of the election were not impacted. The Trump campaign did nothing wrong, no collusion. You are a co-conspirator. You asked Russia for help out loud. You said it was a hoax. How many times? You promoted their idea that our elections are rigged. It's a rigged system. Rigged. And we all wondered if he won, how would he get out of it? He just dropped it. And his MAGA people just don't ask any questions because they have very short memories. But anyway, this is what they did for voter suppression. In or around the latter half of 2016, defendants and their co-conspirators, some known and some unknown to the grand jury, used the organization-controlled personas and began to encourage U.S. minority groups not to vote in the 2016 U.S. presidential election or to vote for a third-party candidate. That pretty much worked. On or about October 16, 2016, defendants and their co-conspirators used the organization-controlled Instagram account, Woke Blacks, to post the following message. Quote, "A particular hype and hatred for Trump is misleading the people and forcing blacks to vote Hillary. We cannot resort to the lesser of two devils. Then we surely be better off by not voting at all." On or about November 3rd, 2016, defendants and their co-conspirators purchased an advertisement to promote a post on the organization's controlled Instagram account, Blacktivist. Blacktivist was Russian. It read in part, quote, "Choose peace and vote for Jill Stein. Trust me, it's not a wasted vote." By in or around early November 2016, defendants and their co-conspirators used the organization-controlled United Muslims of America social media accounts to post anti-voting messages such as, quote, "American Muslims are boycotting elections today. Most of the American Muslim voters refuse to vote for Hillary Clinton because she wants to continue the war on Muslims in the Middle East and voted yes for invading Iraq." Starting in or around the summer of 2016, defendants and their co-conspirators also began to promote allegations of voter fraud by the Democratic Party through their fictitious U.S. personas and groups on social media. Defendants and their co-conspirators purchased advertisements on Facebook to further promote the allegations. On or about August 4th, 2016, defendants and their co-conspirators began purchasing advertisements that promoted a post on the organization's controlled Facebook account, Stop AI. The post alleged that, quote, "Hillary Clinton has already committed voter fraud during the Democrat Iowa caucus." On or about August 11th, 2016, defendants and their co-conspirators posted allegations of voter fraud were being investigated in North Carolina. That was promoted on the organization's controlled Twitter account at 10GOP. It was retweeted by Junior and Kellyanne Conway. On or about November 2nd, 2016, defendants and their co-conspirators used the same account to post allegations of, quote, hashtag voter fraud by counting tens of thousands of ineligible mail-in Hillary votes being reported in Broward County, Florida. Broward! From at least April 2016 through November 2016, defendants and their co-conspirators, while concealing their Russian identities and organization affiliation through false personas, began to produce, purchase, and post advertisements on U.S. social media and other online sites expressly advocating for the election of then-candidate Trump, expressly opposing Hillary Clinton. Defendants and their co-conspirators did not report their expenditures to the Federal Election Commission or register as foreign agents with the U.S. Department of Justice. Isn't that interesting? Failure to register as foreign agents. And the Federal Election Commission did nothing. Who was at the Federal Election Commission during this time? A name. The pressure of a name. Don McGahn! Now the White House counsel. Then they organized rallies while pretending to be U.S. grassroots activists who were located in the U.S. but unable to meet or participate in person. They instructed some people to build cages and dress up as Hillary Clinton in prison garb, which Americans did. The Russians love you for that. Traitors. There was a Facebook group they created called Being Patriotic. Then there was a Twitter account at March for Trump. They organized two political rallies in New York. The first rally was called March for Trump. It was held on June 25th, 2016. The second rally was called Down with Hillary. And it was on July 23rd, 2016 in New York. Florida goes Trump rallies. Russian. After the rallies in Florida, Russian rallies, defendants and their co-conspirators used false personas to organize and coordinate political rallies in New York and Pennsylvania. He was in Pennsylvania. He said, "Anybody? I don't see any Russians here. I didn't see very many Russians here. They were there." And Comey busted them.
To speak to Randi, call now, you bastards. 561-270-3844.
Hello.
The Randi Rhodes Air Force.
Hey guys, it's Scotty, Randi's producer here, and as many of you know, I grew up in Randi's house. You know, eating her food, watching her TV, and like most kids, ignorantly not following her advice. And one of her biggest pieces of advice was never take a job in radio because the big companies that run radio, they suck. Well, I didn't listen and ended up working in radio. And as always, Randi was right. They sucked. But I'm here now and I can tell you that it takes a lot of chutzpah to break away from the big companies and start your own show. But you know what else it takes? Your support. We are independent media, so the only financial backers we have are you, the best listeners in the world. And we can't do it without you. So please go to randirhodes.com and support the show, buy a stinking podcast, donate some money, and keep us going.
Whether you're listening to me, Mark Levine, each Monday and Wednesday,
or me, Leslie Marshall, each Tuesday, Thursday, and Friday,
you can hear us 3 to 4 p.m. Eastern Time on the Progressive Voices Network.
Here's a sample of what you'll hear.
David K. Johnston is our guest. His new book called It's Even Worse Than You Think, What the Trump Administration is Doing to America.
One of Donald's best skills, and he has lots of skills, is to figure out how to get you to look at and pay attention to something totally unrelated so you're not thinking about what he is concerned you might think about. The team he brought in have loosed what I call political termites into the structure of the government. These termites are busy destroying the capacity of the government to do its work. And they're doing this in every federal agency. He and his administration are there to provide a government of the rich, by the rich, for the rich, and arguably of, by, and for the billionaires.
Let's talk about the destruction from within.
The people that were put in the Department of Environmental Protection, that agency now is turning into, letting polluters run free. So we have a lot fewer deaths and sicknesses in this country because Richard Nixon signed the Clean Air Act and the Clean Water Act, which contains the word shall. The government shall enforce that law. Well, they're not enforcing it, and they're helping the polluters. Trump's first budget proposed cutting for many disabled veterans their benefits when they get to retirement age from $35,000 a year to $13,000. Now, that's been stopped, but considering that Trump said, I love the veterans, we're going to take care of our veterans, nobody took care of veterans, but I will take care of the veterans. That shows you what a fraud that is. At the Education Department, where the utterly unqualified and incompetent Betsy DeVos, the billionaire heiress from Michigan, was made education secretary, they have to deal with the student loan problem, which is largely people who went to these commercial schools that charge far more than community colleges and give far less education. And her department has taken the side of the bankers against the students because who did she bring in to address the student loan problem? Well, she brought in the predatory lenders. This is not the fox guarding the hen house, Leslie. This is telling the fox, redesign the hen house to make sure that you dine really well on chicken.
And this is somebody who I saw today has completely blocked complaints of all teachers in the public school system nationwide. It's sort of like if you can't make your complaint known to the boss, what good is somebody heading up the United States Department of Education?
They are not there to drain the swamp. They are the swamp monsters.
Again, that's Mark Levine every Monday and Wednesday.
And Leslie Marshall each Tuesday, Thursday, and Friday.
3 to 4 p.m. Eastern Time on the Progressive Voices Network.
Call in, connect. To speak to Randi, call 561-270-3844. 561-270-3844.
A rigged system.
Rigged. To rig the system.
Rig the system.
Totally rigged.
Rigged press.
Totally rigged system. The election's going to be rigged.
We're running against a rigged press. We're running against dishonest people. Okay? Really dishonest people.
I don't even really know where to start on answering this question. Of course, the elections will not be rigged. What does that mean?
But that was what Russia wanted him to say. They wanted to sow doubt in the electoral process itself. They wanted to suppress voters. They wanted to suppress minority voters because they were told that Hillary voters are minorities. So they set up Muslim accounts. They said to reach Muslim Americans. They set up accounts for blacktivists to reach African Americans. They set up all kinds of, and then they sent Trump out to say it was a rigged system because they wanted to sow insecurity in our in the electoral system itself. And then, of course, he actually proactively sought Russia's help.
Russia, if you're listening, I hope you're able to find the 30,000 emails that are missing. I think you will probably be rewarded mightily by our press.
Idiot. Oh my God. He was so obvious. It was just it's so unbelievable. The dossier, by the way, is being proven truer and truer each and every day. There are so many things that are, verified now in this dossier. The dossier says that the Republican candidate's campaign manager, Paul Manafort, who was using foreign policy advisor Carter Page and others as intermediaries. The two sides had a mutual interest in defeating Democratic presidential candidate Hillary Clinton, whom President Putin apparently both hated and feared. That turns out to be true. Source E acknowledged that the Russian regime had been behind the recent leak of embarrassing email messages emanating from the DNC. That turned out to be true. That they released it to the WikiLeaks platform, and that the reason for using WikiLeaks was plausible deniability, and the operation had been conducted with the full knowledge and support of Trump and senior members of his campaign team. Well, the last part isn't proven yet, but the first part is, right? And in return, the Trump team had agreed to sideline Russian intervention in Ukraine as a campaign issue and to raise U.S. NATO defense commitments in the Baltics and Eastern Europe to deflect attention away from Ukraine, a priority for Putin, who needed to cauterize the subject. That did happen. The Republicans changed their platform, denied lethal weapons to Ukraine so that they couldn't defend themselves against Russian invasion. And, they did agree to question our NATO allies as to whether or not NATO is still relevant and whether or not they pay their fair share. Source E claimed that the intelligence network being used against Clinton comprised three elements. Firstly, there were agents and facilitators within the Democratic Party structure itself. We don't know that. Secondly, Russian emigres and associated offensive cyber operators. That's true. And thirdly, state-sponsored cyber operatives working in Russia. That's true. All three elements had played an important role to date on the mechanism for rewarding relevant assets based in the U.S. and affecting a two-way flow of intelligence and other useful information. Source E claimed that Russian diplomatic staff in key cities such as New York, that's confirmed, Washington, D.C., it's confirmed in the indictment, and Florida, Miami, Florida, that's confirmed in the indictment, using the emigre pension distribution system as cover. The fact that the pension system was used is not yet proven. The fact that they had contacts in New York, Washington, and Miami is addressed in this indictment. The operation, therefore, depended on key people in the U.S.-Russian emigre community for its success. Tens of thousands of dollars were involved. Actually, it was $1.25 million per month. That's what's in the indictment. Now, Comey was all over this, okay? Comey, my boyfriend, he was all over this because in September of 2017, September 13th, 2017, there was an email that was written by one of the defendants named in this indictment. His name is Kavarzina. He wrote an email to one of his family members. This is a Russian. He said, "We had a slight crisis here at work. The FBI busted our activity, not a joke. So I got preoccupied with covering tracks together with colleagues. I created all these pictures and posts, and the Americans believed that it was written by their people. So the FBI was all over this. All right, let's go to October 24th, 2016. Defendants and their co-conspirators updated an internal organization list of over 100 real United States persons contacted through the organization's false U.S. persona accounts and tracked to monitor recruitment efforts and requests for recruitment. The list included contact information for the U.S. persons, a summary of their political views, and activities they have been asked to perform by the Russians and their co-conspirators, by the defendants and their co-conspirators. On or about August 31st, 2016, defendants and their co-conspirators using a U.S. persona spoke by telephone to a real U.S. person affiliated with a grassroots group in Florida. That individual requested assistance in organizing a rally in Miami. That's where Miami comes into the dossier also. On or about September 9th, 2016, defendants and their co-conspirators sent the group an interstate wire to pay for the materials needed for the Florida rally on September 11th, 2016. On or about August 31st, 2016, defendants and their co-conspirators created and purchased Facebook advertisements for a rally they organized and scheduled for New York on September 11th, 2016. On or about September 9th, 2016, defendants and their co-conspirators, through a false U.S. persona, contacted a real U.S. person who had impersonated Clinton at the West Palm Beach rally. Defendants and their co-conspirators sent that U.S. person money via interstate wire as an inducement to travel from Florida to New York and to dress in costume at another rally they organized. And the costume was Hillary Clinton, in a prison outfit. On or about September 22nd, defendants and their co-conspirators created and purchased Facebook advertisements for a series of rallies they organized in Pennsylvania called Miners for Trump, scheduled October 2nd, 2016. That's all in count one. There are 8 counts in this indictment. You get that there was an underlying crime here. The crime that Donald Trump says is a hoax, the dossier that is garbage and made up.
They've done with this fake dossier, it was made up, and I understand they paid a tremendous amount of money, and Hillary Clinton always denied it. The Democrats always denied it. And now only because it's going to come out in a court case, they said, yes, they did it, they admitted it, and they're embarrassed by it. But I think it's a disgrace. It's just really it's a very sad commentary on politics in this country. And I have to say, the whole Russian thing is what it's turned out to be. This was the Democrats coming up with an excuse for losing an election. It's an election that's very hard for a Democrat to lose because the Electoral College is set in such a way that it's very hard to lose that election for a Democrat. They lost it. They lost it very badly and very easily. I mean, you look at the votes. It was 306 to what, 223 or something. They lost it by a lot. They didn't know what to say.
He keeps doing this, and this is aiding and abetting the conspiracy. This is, not assigning anybody from his administration to look into this conspiracy. Jeff Sessions obviously lied about his contacts with Russians. Junior lied about his contacts with Russians. Kushner lied about his contacts with Russians, and he lied on his financial disclosure forms. Flynn obviously lied about his contact with Russians and payments he received from Russia. U.S. citizens receive payments from Russia in various states to organize and to travel on behalf of the Russian government, and Mueller's willing to give them the benefit of the doubt, say they didn't know. It doesn't matter. What matters is that Trump helped it. Trump did exactly what Russia wanted done. They wanted to sow discord in the actual electoral process. And Trump went out there and said the whole system is rigged. Rigged.
A rigged system.
Rigged.
To rig the system.
Rig the system.
Totally rigged. Rigged press. Totally rigged system.
Okay? And then he asked for help. And this is really crazy. This is just so disturbing of all the things, okay? Because Trump is the president, but I think we all know who he is. How many people pay attention to our CIA director, Mike Pompeo? Back then, Mike Pompeo, who now is our CIA director, counterintelligence chief, okay? He's supposed to be looking into this crap. When Lou Dobbs asked about the Russia, if you're listening, we really want to find the 30,000 emails, Mike Pompeo covered for Trump and said, oh, it was a joke.
Why all of the nefarious activities of the DNC had been exposed and their emails released by WikiLeaks. Adjudicate this thing for us, would you?
Lou, it's classic Clinton, right? When you find out you got a problem, you deflect, you deny, you create a contretemps where there really is none. Frankly, it's pretty clear who invited the Russians to do damage to America, and it was Hillary Clinton. She put classified information on a private server, inviting the Chinese, the Iranians, the Russians, all to have access to it. I hope they didn't get it, but even the former director of the CIA said he thinks they probably did. So the person who's put American national security at risk isn't Donald Trump, it's Hillary Clinton.
And Donald Trump today, when he said, and I have to say to you, Congressman, I thought it was one of the, forgive me, but I thought it was an extremely humorous, even witty remark on the part of the Republican nominee to say, Russia, if you're listening, if you were to find those 33 missing emails, the national media and indeed the government would appreciate you passing them on. You're a member of the Select Committee on Intelligence, Benghazi Committee. I mean, what's your reaction to it all?
Yeah, I thought Mr. Trump was just joking too. I don't think he truly meant to invite the Russians to come steal American information. We all know that foreign governments can't steal American information. If they do, they'll be prosecuted. I saw Governor Pence say the same thing this afternoon. I think the Democrats are trying to make a big deal out of this because they recognize that with Russia advancing in Ukraine and ISIS destructive all around the world, that they've got an enormous problem.
That's our CIA director currently. It was all a joke. Everything was a joke. Hillary Clinton's the real threat to national security. You have over 100 people working in the White House without security clearances. And Hillary Clinton's email server is what they're focused. This is unbelievable to me. You have a president of the United States who is clearly a co-conspirator with a hostile government. Russia does not have American freedom or the form of government in America at heart. Okay, they're not pro-democracy. They're not pro-free press. They're not they're not pro-Second Amendment, the Russians. And you've got a guy who's doing exactly what they asked him to do.
Ladies and gentlemen, I want to make a major announcement today. I would like to promise and pledge to all of my voters and supporters and to all of the people of the United States that I will totally accept the results of this great and historic presidential election if I win. A rigged system. Rigged. To rig the system.
Rig the system.
Totally rigged. Rigged press. Totally rigged. The election's going to be rigged. We're running against a rigged press. We're running against dishonest people.
That's exactly what they wanted him to do. He did it. Russia, if you're listening, was very proactive also. And then the denials thereafter. And not one order to stop Russia from hacking or meddling in the U.S. election since. Everyone testified this week from the intelligence communities that we are currently still under attack. And Russia has not stopped their behavior. So what Mueller did today was he showed you there is an underlying crime which he didn't even need to do, but it's good that he did.
commercial-free, on-demand, whenever, wherever listening experience. Visit RandiRhodes.com for your personal premium podcast today.
Now, the top of the hour on the Progressive Voices channel on TuneIn presents the Green News Report.
I think there's assumptions made that because the climate is warming, that necessarily is a bad thing.
Assumptions made by U.S. intelligence agencies who contradict the Trump administration on climate risks.
The question is whether the public message that Exxon put out there to investors constituted fraud.
ExxonMobil countersues against climate change lawsuits. Broadcast news still failing to inform the public about the real-life impacts of climate change. Plus, the Queen of England has had it with single-use plastic waste.
All of those stories and more straight ahead. From BradBlog.com, I'm Brad Friedman.
And I'm Desi Doyen.
Stand by for 6 minutes of independent green news, politics, analysis, and snarky comment. Today's snarky comment comes from commenter Joe, who writes in to say, I really wish you would just stick to the facts and drop the inane snarky comments. It's douchey. Okay, Joe. No snarky comments for anybody then. Thanks. This is your Green News Report. Okay, Desi Doyen, we are coming up on the 9th anniversary of the Green News Report. So thanks to those of you who stopped by bradblog.com/donate to help us in our 10th year. But now, I guess, we're going to have to cut out the snarky comments, says Joe. Well,
I disagree.
That's what he says. It's douchey. Never douchey, however, are your reports. What do you have for us today, Des?
Well, U.S. intelligence agencies are openly defying the Trump administration's denial of climate change. You may remember that last week, EPA Administrator Scott Pruitt tried again to mislead the American public by sowing doubt about whether climate change is as dangerous as scientists warn that it is.
Is it an existential threat? Is it something that is unsustainable? So I think there's assumptions made that because the climate is warming, that necessarily is a bad thing.
Well, this week, the U.S. intelligence agencies, in their annual worldwide threat assessment, said it is unequivocally a bad thing, joining with federal science agencies in directly contradicting the Trump administration. The threat assessment unambiguously warns of the destabilizing influence of climate change, like extreme weather events that, quote, raise the risk of humanitarian disasters, conflict, water and food shortages, and population migration. Further, the assessment says that climate change is, quote, likely to fuel economic and social discontent and possibly upheaval through 2018.
Well, since when does the Trump administration listen to U.S. intelligence agencies? Is that too snarky?
I don't think so. The Trump administration this week also moved to repeal one of the last unchallenged Obama-era climate change regulations, a rule that required oil and gas companies to fix and capture methane leaks from drilling on public lands. Multiple outside analyses have found that, contrary to Trump's claims about deregulation, repealing the methane rule will not actually create any new jobs. It will actually reduce the natural gas supply from public lands because of leaks, and the public will lose out on royalties from all that wasted natural gas, as much as $23 million a year.
Yeah, but it will make the Republicans' fossil fuel donors very happy.
Speaking of Republican fossil fuel donors, ExxonMobil is turning the tables in court and is now suing the lawyers who are suing it over climate change. Exxon's countersuit claims that attorneys general, public officials, and environmental groups are conspiring against it. Exxon is targeting at least 30 people and organizations, including the attorneys general of New York, California, and Massachusetts, who are suing Exxon over allegations that it misled the public and its investors about climate change, despite knowing the risks of the use of fossil fuels.
Good luck with that, Exxon.
Well, critics do suggest that the gambit is intended to harass mayors and city attorneys into dropping their lawsuits. Media Matters says the broadcast news networks are reporting more on climate change, but still failing to educate the public about its real-life impact. The analysis of nightly nightly news shows and Sunday morning shows found that in all of 2017, a year of historic, deadly weather disasters, there was indeed more coverage of climate change. But corporate media outlets focused largely on Trump and his uninformed opinions, and they undercovered or ignored the administration's rollback of pollution standards and focused even less on climate science and the impacts of global warming on people, the economy, and national security.
Very douchey.
Finally, the Queen of England has had it with plastic waste. The UK's Telegraph reports that the monarch is believed to be behind an announcement this week that Buckingham Palace will phase out single-use plastics like plastic straws, bottles, and utensils from its public cafes and all royal properties, and will switch to compostable and biodegradable packaging for the royal family to do its part to reduce plastic waste in the ocean.
Long live the Queen. For much more on all of those reports and the ones we couldn't get to, please check out our website at greennews.bradblog.com. Don't forget you can download our reports anytime via Stitcher, TuneIn, or iTunes. Find us, follow us, and share us worldwide on the Facebooks and the Twitters at Green News Report. I'm Brad Friedman.
And I'm Desi Doyen.
And this has been your Green News Report.
Please help Progressive Voices support the Green News Report by stopping by bradblog.com/donate.
Mary had a little man. The fault. We believe that all men are created equal.
To the magnificent mosaic that is America. From radio beacon to radio beacon. I have a dream.
Change has come to America.
Believe me. Knock, knock. Who's there?
It's a figment of your imagination.
Randi Rhodes Show.
Turn up your mind.
Which is about an underlying crime. And of course, this is major that we have now proof of an underlying crime. But I want to point out that impeachment does not require an underlying crime. There's no evidence that Richard Nixon knew anything about the break-in at the DNC in the Watergate office building. What is known is that he obstructed justice, and we have plenty of evidence of obstruction of justice by Trump and the White House and all his staff. So we don't really need proof of this, but it is definitely better from a prosecution standpoint to have that proof, and now we have it.
Ken Delaney, and I'll turn to you once again here. You're making your way through this indictment here. What does the indictment say in particular here? What does it allege about what a role the Trump campaign may have played in all of this? How much is the Trump campaign invoked in the document that we see before us here in these 37 pages?
I haven't read every word, David, but as far as I can tell, it does not address that crucial question. And I was told by Justice Department officials that any Americans mentioned in this have played an unwitting role in this interference effort. What it does lay out, though, is a very complex conspiracy, and it even shows that, for example, once the Russians realized the FBI were onto them, they started covering their tracks and destroying evidence. And the reason the conspiracy is important, as Jill will know, is that now that there is a conspiracy, any acts in furtherance of the conspiracy can be charged, and that could extend to Americans and people who are not named in this indictment. So it's a very important legal issue here that the government is alleging a massive and complex conspiracy by these Russians to interfere in the 2016 presidential election.
Seth Waxman, let me have you comment on that. I'll bring in Jill Wine-Banks on the heels of that as well. Just pick up on what Ken Delaney just said there about the role of the alleged conspiracy.
Well, yeah, to the fact that there's a conspiracy in place, it's exactly right. Any acts that are in furtherance of that conspiracy can be charged, and anyone that participated in that conspiracy intentionally and knowingly can also be charged. They don't have to participate in every single aspect of that conspiracy. As long as they participated knowingly in some aspect of the conspiracy, they can be brought in. So a conspiracy charge is an incredibly powerful tool for federal prosecutors. And just
it is also true that in an indictment, a criminal indictment, and now this is assuming that everyone can get past that the president can be indicted, which I believe is actually the case, and there is a lot of support for that. We chose in Watergate to name the president as an unindicted co-conspirator and to provide a roadmap to Congress for impeachment. But if you indict him, then he only has to participate in any one act in furtherance of any conspiracy, and he is guilty of the entire conspiracy. That is true of every participant in the conspiracy. So you don't have to, as Seth said, you don't have to even know who the other participants are. All you have to do is do one thing in furtherance of it, deliberately doing that.
Well, let's see. Do you think this was deliberately doing that? Do you think that this was aiding and abetting the Russian conspiracy?
Russia, if you're listening, I hope you're able to find the 30,000 emails that are missing. I think you will probably be rewarded mightily by our press.
If Russia was trying to sow a disbelief in our own elections, in our own processes, if they were trying to, tell people that don't even bother to vote because your votes don't get counted, there's election fraud in the United States, the whole thing is rigged. Do you think Trump furthered that thought?
A rigged system.
Rigged. To rig the system.
Rig the system.
Totally rigged. Rigged press. Totally rigged system. The election's going to be rigged.
And just saying. Did he cooperate? Did he further the conspiracy? Did he further sowing doubt in Americans' minds that the system wasn't rigged? Did he create an environment that said everybody's vote counts equally? No, what he said was it's rigged and I will only accept the results if I win. If I win.
Ladies and gentlemen, I want to make a major announcement today. I would like to promise and pledge to all of my voters and supporters and to all of the people of the United States that I will totally accept the results of this great and historic presidential election if I win.
A rigged system.
Rigged. To rig the system.
Rig the system.
Totally rigged. Rigged press. Totally rigged system.
I rest my case. There you have it. So here's what's important about what happened today. This indictment is very specific to 13 individuals and 3 Russian companies. It's very specific to that because it's an indictment of those individuals and those companies. And what it lays out is a Russian conspiracy to sow discord, to suppress Hillary voters, to support Donald Trump. That is what this conspiracy and this indictment about this conspiracy and these defendants and these companies is. That is what this specific indictment is. Just remember that if Donald Trump aided and abetted, covered up and or supported or took any action to cover it up, to not investigate it, to stand in the way, to fire James Comey, who obviously was investigating it in a counterintelligence FBI investigation, if he was misleading the American people into believing their votes didn't count or that the system was rigged or asking Russia for help, then he did all 3 of those things, proactive things. He did everything to cover it up, to encourage it, and to foster exactly the Russian conspirators' ideas and ideals, which was you can't trust the American system. It's rigged. Hillary Clinton is bad. Donald Trump is good. And once he became president, covering up any involvement and obstructing any investigation, again, with proactive and non-active decisions. Proactive firing Comey over this Russia thing. Right? That's proactive. Non-active or inactive is not instructing anyone from the CIA, Mike Pompeo, who thinks this whole thing is a joke, right? And elevates himself to CIA director. But also not encouraging Chris Wray to take any proactive steps to protect the American identities of Americans, bank accounts of Americans, investigating, what Russia's, interference actually entails. There's been nothing. There's been nothing because he denies it even happened. So here we are. And this is just a beautiful situation to be in. I mean, for all the sad and horrible news we had this week, this is great news. Also, the other piece of great news to do with Mueller's investigation. You remember Paul Manafort had a partner. His original law firm was called Black Manafort. Was it just Black Manafort and Stone, or was it was just Black Manafort and Stone? Wasn't there another name in there somewhere? I think there was another name. But anyway, that was the former, that was Roger Stone and, Charlie Black and Paul Manafort. But then Paul Manafort left and he started his own called Manafort Davis. Kelly, yeah, I knew that there was another. But anyway, Rick Gates was indicted alongside Paul Manafort. In fact, that indictment was an indictment against both men. The single indictment addressed both men. Both men, Manafort and Rick Gates, were indicted for money laundering, tax evasion, false statements to law enforcement, and on and on. Manafort has been, charged with laundering more than $18 million. Gates was accused of transferring about $3 million from offshore accounts, but they were charged in the same indictment, okay? Looks like, remember a couple weeks ago, I don't even know. I mean, there's so much goes on in a week these days. It's mind-blowing. But that Rick Gates had dropped his law firm had asked permission from the court to remove them from representation of Rick Gates. They didn't want to represent him anymore. And apparently it was because they couldn't agree on what needed to be done legally on behalf of Gates. Now, I don't know what they were advocating Rick Gates do, and neither do you, but whatever it is, they petitioned the court to be removed because that's what lawyers have to do. They can't just drop you, okay, in the middle of your horrible, situation. They're supposed to defend you all the way through unless they petition the court and the court grants it. Anyway, Rick Gates moved to a different law firm. This different law firm that he's with now seems to be indicating that Rick Gates is ready to accept a plea deal with Mueller in exchange for information pertinent to the Mueller investigation. What's important about Rick Gates is while Manafort left the Trump campaign, Gates survived. And Gates was actually part of the inaugural committee. Gates was part of the presidency. So if Gates cooperates with Mueller, then Gates may be able to provide some inside baseball about the actual administration and the transition. And it seems to me that nobody wants to talk about this transition period. Seems to me that a lot of really bad stuff happened during the transition. Now, Bannon, the House, even the House GOP, which I doubt will do anything, but the House GOP is pondering whether or not to hold Steve Bannon in contempt of Congress because Steve Bannon refused. He kept, saying he had executive privilege for the period of the transition. Well, when you're transitioning into the executive, you don't have executive privilege because you're not the executive. So you have no privilege. Not until you swear the oath and you're, sworn in, do you assume office and all its privileges. So Bannon was, saying he had executive privilege. There was no privilege during the transition, but he refused to answer questions. Finally, they negotiated something. I don't know. He showed up this week for the House Intelligence Committee's questions, but he handed them. Adam Schiff said that Bannon showed up with questions already typed out for them to ask Steve Bannon. And there were 25 questions that Steve Bannon said he would answer. They were all yes or no questions, and his answer to every one of them was no. But they were questions he wrote or somebody on his behalf wrote. And this is all Bannon. So they're pondering whether or not to hold him in contempt of Congress. However, he did spend 20 hours with Mueller. And, he said some really extraordinary things. He has said that Don Jr. is going to be perp walked, that he's going to, get popped on television. Reince Priebus, oh, my God, there's a Vanity Fair article that if this shooting didn't happen, here in if it didn't happen, I would have read you. I mean, I swear to God, I would have read the whole thing in Vanity Fair about Reince Priebus saying that whatever you think he went through in the White House, multiply it by 50. That's how bad it was. And he says things like after 6 o'clock on January 21st, Reince Priebus was, in Alexandria, Virginia, and he was watching cable news, and he was getting ready to leave for the White House, and his cell phone goes off, and it's Donald Trump. And, he's only been sworn in like less than 24 hours, but he had seen the Washington Post with photos showing the inaugural, and it wasn't as big as Barack Obama's, and he was livid, and he's screaming at him, and he goes, the story is bullshit. There's more people there. They couldn't get in the gates. There's all kinds of things that were going on, made it impossible for people to get there, and he goes, and then we were off to the races, and he said he wanted the president to call Ryan Zinke and find out from the Park Service and do research right away. But it goes on and on into, the cover-up and the and the Bannon quotes and how, the president's going down. And, oh, my God. So I don't know what Bannon told Mueller, but I will tell you, when you talk to a special prosecutor, there's no executive privilege claim that can be made. Not that he had one during the transition, but the transition seems like a particularly interesting time.
The Randi Rhodes Air Force. The Randi Rhodes Show is live on RandiRhodes.com and the free Progressive Voices app for Android and iOS. Visit the App Store or ProgressiveVoices.com now.
Hey everybody, it's Brett from the Randi Rhodes Show. Independent media is the future, and Randi's leading the way. And it's ironic, the more freedom she gained, the more expensive it got. It's crucial now, more than ever, to keep this show pure and free of corporate influence so Randi can tell the hard truths. The first step to change is an unbiased media, and for that, we need your help. So please, go to RandiRhodes.com/support and subscribe, you bastards.
Gobble, gobble. It's time for more turkey. Oh, yeah. All natural turkey jerky from Herky Jerky. That has been a hit ever since they introduced it in late 2017, that turkey jerky, because it's got no nitrates, no artificial ingredients, no MSG, preservatives, and no fat. The turkey jerky is the perfect snack any time of day. And, oh my God, it's absolutely delicious. It's bite-sized pieces of fresh turkey. It's meat that tastes just like the oven-roasted bird that you had on Thanksgiving. It's got just the right amount of everything: salt, smoke, flavoring, and spices. It's unlike anything you've ever had, and they don't skimp. They're going to send you a 14-ounce bag that is going to keep you munching for a long time. Nothing like those wimpy 3-ounce gas station bags. And all this month, $6 off every bag of turkey jerky, and there is no promo code needed. So you get free shipping with 2 bags or more of anything you order in the Herky Jerky store, including Smokies, bacon, beef, buffalo, elk, and venison jerky and sticks. February is the perfect time. Stock up on all the delicious products from Herky Jerky, especially the scrumptious turkey jerky. Order it today at herkyjerky.com.
Hello, Progressive Voices Tune-In listeners. I'm Casey Hobbs.
And I'm Shane Mason, and we're the hosts of Nurse Talk Radio.
Here's what we're talking about this week. Just explain to me for a minute. So the reports must show that there is great harm to the community,
yes,
both in the land and in people's health.
It's showing that in communities where this particular kind of gas extraction is happening, people have headaches and animals have been sick and kids are having nosebleeds and a wide array of other signs and symptoms. But the other thing that we need to note is that these chronic exposures are probably teeing them up for longer term chronic diseases and, perhaps diseases that we're going to see later on.
Unfortunately, then the people will be far into their illnesses and it'll be harder for them to get any good health care as a result of years of that.
Amanda Krantz is the founder and CEO of Doja.com, a website connecting patients and caregivers for the sole purpose of sharing gratitude.
The person you want to thank may not be coming in for the next couple shifts. Now, if you leave a paper card or leave cookies, you don't know if it got to the person that you wanted to thank.
So true, and oftentimes it doesn't, yeah.
Yeah, so now we wrote pre-written responses. Thank you so much for your kind words. It means the most to me. And patients can attach photos as well. And so, it was great to see how well you're doing now.
Yeah.
Those things mean so much to the patient, and it's still no HIPAA HIPAA violation. Get on in 90 seconds, share your gratitude, be done. You might not think of thanking them until years later.
I've been in nursing a long time, and when I was 25, taking care of a gentleman who had had a heart attack, and on the fourth day I walk into his room and he says, I wanted to thank you. Mm-hmm. I got you flowers because you really turned around my thinking about male nurses. And I am standing there wearing earrings, and I said, thank you so much. I appreciate it.
Check out our show at nursetalksite.com and listen every Saturday and Sunday right here on Progressive Voices.
The Randi Rhodes Show is live on RandiRhodes.com and the free Progressive Voices app for Android and iOS. Visit the App Store or ProgressiveVoices.com now.
And by the way, folks, just in case you're curious, no, Russia did not help me.
Not according to this indictment,
Russia.
they did.
I call it the Russian hoax. One of the great hoaxes. Actually, that's the thing I was thinking about. It. That's the thing that the Democrats did best. Mm-hmm. They lost the election, and they didn't know what happened. And they needed an excuse. So they said, Russia. And then they said, wait a minute, Russia. And Trump, honestly, it's the thing they did best. They did a rotten job of running. But to convince people about this hoax, that was probably the thing that they did best. But it is one great hoax. No, Russia did not help me. That I can tell you, okay?
According to this indictment, yeah, they did. Yeah, a criminal indictment. And we probably stand zero chance of ever prosecuting any of these Russians unless, Vlad extradites them to the United States. Chances of that, I say 0 to none. But this is proving the underlying crime happened and showing that Donald Trump has been lying to the American people for a very long time. And during the campaign, he was lying to the American people about a rigged system because that's what Russia wanted him to say. During the campaign, he was praising Vladimir Putin because Putin was helping him. And during the campaign, he was saying that he would only accept the results of the election if he won. And during the campaign, he was, denigrating Hillary Clinton. He had Michael Flynn, who's now indicted, and also, taking a plea deal and cooperating with Robert Mueller, who was screaming, lock her up. The Russians wanted that to be the meme. They wanted that to be the thing that was said about Hillary. They wanted to say, they wanted everybody in the Trump campaign to say lock her up, that she was a criminal. They wanted people to dress up in jail costumes. And they did. Americans did it. They actually did do it. They didn't know, they say, that they were helping Russia propagandize within the United States. They didn't know that they were helping Russia. They got paid to do it. They didn't know money was coming from Russia. But they did. And those hashtags, MAGA, Make America Great, that is a Russian hashtag. So everybody that retweeted that, don't you ever question my patriotism. All right, Stacy in St. Croix. Vince in Hampton? What's Hampton?
I'm here, right here.
What's Hampton?
Hampton, Virginia.
Oh, okay.
Well, you might have answered my question, but this is sort of like a proof or a tip of the hand. Why did he say Russia, if you're listening? But why didn't he say Britain or Japan?
Right, which is why it stuck out like a sore thumb when he said it. Everybody was like, what is he talking about? Why?
He said it because he already knew.
Of course he knew. And that's why there needed to be an investigation. And when Comey was doing the investigation, he got fired.
Yeah, of course. And the meeting, we know the meeting happened. And so, and then we see that he says Russia, if you listen, he doesn't say any other country. He's showing his knowledge of that they've already met and they already said they have the goods. And, and the meeting is evidence of that. And even today, Randy, we have still not implemented the embargo or what is
the sanctions.
The sanctions.
Yeah, he refuses. Russia. He refuses to enforce the law as voted by Congress and signed by him. He just refuses.
This was Barack Obama.
Oh my God.
they would be leaping out of their seat.
Okay, make it even worse. If this were Hillary Clinton refusing to impose sanctions on Russia, they would start screaming, "It's the uranium deal and the Clinton Foundation and the process." You know, I mean, honest to God. But, yeah, I mean, here we are with a president who's asking Russia for help, denying that the elections can be trusted. It's a rigged system, rigged. A guy whose son is communicating with WikiLeaks, a guy whose son is having meetings with his son-in-law and his campaign manager and Michael Flynn in Trump Tower, to get dirt on Hillary Clinton, supplied by the Russians, emails saying, if you have what you say you have, I love it, especially at the end of the summer. You've got Trump siding with Vladimir Putin, saying, Vladimir Putin says he didn't interfere with the elections, and I believe him.
So, Randy, help us. What are we waiting on? What do you think they're waiting on?
Listen, the wheels of justice are very slow to grind their gears because there's a very high standard of proof to take away somebody's presidency, somebody's liberty, as it should be. And so I think that you can see today that the first thing that Mueller was leading with the most heinous crimes, and those were crimes of money laundering, those were crimes of lying to the FBI, and he was looking to flip people who are in senior positions inside the Trump campaign first for really heinous crimes. And now that they're cooperating, if Rick Gates cooperates also, then they will have Flynn cooperating, they will have Gates cooperating, they have George Papadopoulos cooperating. Who knows if Felix Sater is a double agent? I don't know that yet. And Carter Page obviously has been picked up on intercepted phone calls. So, he's got a lot of stuff there. But the first thing Mueller had to do, and he didn't really have to, but because he's so thorough, is show the underlying crime. And the underlying crime was a conspiracy to support Donald Trump and to suppress Hillary Clinton voters. And he has done that today.
And this guy is so bold.
Now, remember this. Also, let me just say this as I'm explaining it to people. There is no crime called collusion, okay? And Donald Trump seems to think there is, and he keeps saying, see, like I told you, no collusion, and I keep telling you, this is going to be a conspiracy charge. It's going to be a RICO charge. This is going to be conspirators, and this is going to be, just a vast organization that conspired to upend our elections, conspired to support Donald Trump. And the worst part of it is that just like in Watergate, there was a break-in of the DNC, except this was done by a foreign adversary, and the president currently is a foreign agent. So that's what makes it, bizarre, like never heard of this before. So
and trying to take out Mueller.
Right, and so Mueller isn't looking to prove collusion because there's no crime called collusion. He's showing conspiracy. And once you have a conspiracy, the person or persons who did anything to advance it, proactively or deny it, or accept the information that was stolen through the conspiracy, Trump did all three of those things. So this is why he's laying down the underlying crime first.
And it's such a shame, Randy, when I listen to Fox News every once in a while.
Oh, God.
You swear the world is perfect and Trump is innocent as a newborn baby.
Yeah, he's just He's just
it is day and night. There's got to be a law against that. I mean, how can democracy ever exist when you have two facts, two worlds in opposition to one another? It's crazy.
Listen, I don't really care what those people think. I really couldn't care less what they think, the people that watch these lies every day. My question for them is, why do you watch something where they're always wrong? They never get things right, ever. All the big issues of the day, the forgotten man. Have you seen his budget? Everybody, have you seen? Oh, yeah. You know what else is in his budget that nobody talks about? He literally hacks away at money for school security.
Crazy.
Now we've had the 19th mass shooting of this guy, and he literally in his budget provides like no money for school security. And the only thing that probably saved lives in this last one was that the teachers drilled and updated their safety measures constantly and drilled it into the kids' heads what to do if there's an active shooter. And they did one of the teachers actually said the kids got so sick of hearing this stuff, but we just kept on drilling it into their heads. So,
well, let me tell you this, Rand. This is local, but it's global. This just happened yesterday in Hampton, Virginia.
Yeah.
A lady went into Walmart, bought ammunition at the Walmart, and then shot a Walmart employee.
Oh, Jesus.
Yes, it just happened yesterday.
Oh, God.
I'm telling you, it's ridiculous, and you're not going to hear anything about it. We're going to him and haw about it for a few days, and they're going to just pass it right on.
Yeah, well, you know what? I swear to God, I've been tweeting. I started a hashtag called Flip the House, and there's also one called Flip the Senate. But I've been hashtagging everything about this gun violence and everything about this Russia investigation under Flip the House, because without the House, we will never, ever get anything done. We will never get protection for the Dreamers. We will never get some sort of background check, before you could buy an Uzi in this country. You know what I mean? We'll never get anywhere on any of these issues. We will never get this president impeached. We will never have justice in this country. You have to flip the House and flip the Senate. We have to.
Lastly, when Barack Obama was elected, they said they're electing a celebrity. They're electing someone with no background. They believe that he can raise the tides, and whatever he does, he can do no wrong.
They were right in one way. A reality TV star is on the show business totem pole where radio is, and that's where the dog lifts its leg. Yep. So I wouldn't exactly call him a celebrity. I would call him he's Omarosa. We just have Omarosa as a president is what we have there. So.
Yeah, and he can do no wrong. He could have been.
Yeah, he's just a little Zoidea licking up a cool drink of water. That's what he is. Yeah,
he could have been in the school shooting, Randy.
Oh my God, I know. Just like he said, he could have shot somebody on Fifth Avenue. They still elect him.
Oh my God.
I know.
Randy,
have a great weekend. Thank you.
No problem.
Bye, Eddie.
Hi, Randy.
Hi, Eddie.
How are you?
Good.
Hey, you mentioned Rick Gates a couple of minutes ago.
Yes, Rick Gates.
Yeah, there's a story, I think it was Maggie Haberman and
yes.
What was the other one? Ken Vogel, said that the inaugurational committee paid Rick Gates $100,000, and that was out of the $107 million that the inaugurational committee actually raised.
Well, did you see the story today that said that $26 million of inaugural funds were paid to Mrs. Trump, Melania's friend, who used to work for Vogue?
To plan the ceremonies. If you imagine, I wonder if they're going to get the money to plan the military parade as well for Trump, because that inaugurational committee, they raised money from people associated with Flynn, some of the people associated with Kushner, like not U.S. money, foreign money.
Oh, you think? I don't know that.
Yeah, I've when they were talking about Michael Flynn's consulting company, and how he was paid for, I think it was for the Turkish kidnapping plot.
Oh,
yeah, there were certain individuals associated with that payment system that were also giving money, allegedly, to the inauguration committee.
$15 million was given. They were going to give him 15 for the kidnapping, 15 mil. I don't know if they got it or not.
Oh well, I haven't heard a word from him since, so he's not spending it very extravagantly.
Well, he's cooperating with Mueller, you know.
Yeah, he's singing like a canary.
He took a plea deal, so I don't think he's able to spend any of the money, pending the result. So we'll see, but it's all really dirty. The whole thing, the drain the swamp. Listen, Trump was the swamp, and so was Manafort the swamp, and all these lobbyists and his, Tom Barry. Well, I wouldn't say Tom Barry. He's a private businessman, but he was on the inaugural committee too. But I mean, Manafort and Gates, they weren't part of the swamp. They were lobbyists for Russia, for Ukrainian dictators, for the freaking Flynn is the same. That is the swamp.
Yeah, and that's what's interesting about the indictment that I read, you were reading, and I read it as well. The indictment says the crime started being committed in 2014.
Yes, but that it's continued to the present.
And it's continued to the present day. And the reason that that's significant is because it's Title 18, Section 371, which is conspiracy to defraud the United States.
That's right.
And running a free and fair presidential election is one of the core functions of the federal government.
Yes.
And specifically, it's the Electoral College, because, the states do the popular vote, but the feds do the Electoral College. And there's Donald Trump. You just played that clip of him saying his focus was on the Electoral College. And I think, personally, that when he was saying, I need Russian help in all those clips, I think he could have also been signaling not just Russia, but lower-level people in the Trump campaign without being specific about it.
What do you mean?
Saying, hey, I'll accept any help, but I can't tell you directly. And in his mind, he thought that was a crime. So in other words, the Trump campaign people lower down the feeding trough heard it and said, okay, green light, basically. I know this sounds very conspiracy.
Yeah, I go with what I have.
Right, aiding and abetting is a lot easier.
Well, it's not even that. It's anybody that took any action to cover up or actively participate or further the goals of the conspiracy is a co-conspirator. We have
accessory after the fact.
It's a co-conspirator. I'm telling you, this is going to be a RICO case. Remember, Rick Gates, Paul Manafort, they're facing money laundering charges. They're facing lying to the FBI. Rick Gates is on the inaugural committee, okay? Now we got this other side-by-side news story that $26 million goes to Melania's friend who worked at Vogue under Anna Wintour. Really?
And later in that indictment is conspiracy to commit wire fraud and bank fraud.
Oh yeah, and identity theft and all those things. Yeah, it's all in there. It's all in there. There are 8 counts in that indictment. What I read you today was count 1. Okay.
To speak to Randi, call now, you bastards. 561-270-3844.
Hello.
The Randi Rhodes Air Force.
Hey guys, it's Scotty, Randi's producer here, and as many of you know, I grew up in Randi's house. You know, eating her food, watching her TV, and like most kids, ignorantly not following her advice. And one of her biggest pieces of advice was never take a job in radio because the big companies that run radio, they suck. Well, I didn't listen and ended up working in radio. And as always, Randi was right. They sucked. But I'm here now, and I can tell you that it takes a lot of chutzpah to break away from the big companies and start your own show. But you know what else it takes? Your support. We are independent media, so the only financial backers we have are you, the best listeners in the world. And we can't do it without you. So please go to randirhodes.com and support the show, buy a stinking podcast, donate some money, and keep us going.
Hey, Progressive Voices listeners, I'm Rebecca Vallis, host of Off Kilter, the show about poverty, inequality, and everything they intersect with, powered by the Center for American Progress Action Fund. This week, I spoke with Emily Badger at the New York Times Upshot about the 400-year-old history of the term able-bodied, a phrase that's long been at the center of debates around anti-poverty programs. You can find the full episode on the PV app or at progressivevoices.com. Let's take a listen.
In fact, it turns out that, this set of laws that date back 400 years to England, which are really sort of the foundation of how we have built social policy in the United States as well. Like, literally, they include the phrase able-bodied. They include, from the very, very beginning, this distinction between the impotent poor, meaning sort of people who are really powerless to help themselves, and able-bodied poor. And the idea that, we should provide resources and aid to the impotent poor, but we should not freely give stuff away to the able-bodied. Maybe what we should do is sort of set them up in workhouses, try to connect them to work opportunities. But very, very early on, there was this distinction between, people who we thought should be working, people who couldn't work for reasons that were no fault of their own.
So really the first distinction between the deserving and the undeserving.
Yes, exactly. And there's, the idea that some people are worthy and some people are not gets expressed in a lot of different ways. We talk about, sort of people who are lazy versus people who are industrious, or, people who are able-bodied, or people who are crippled or disabled or something like that. And, whatever language we use, always this idea that, one group really sort of unquestionably should be given help by us without judgment, and the other group is probably trying to freeload off of the public sort of off of the public's willingness to help people. And when you think about it that way, as one historian pointed out to me, part of the reason why we have these really expensive government bureaucracies in the United States around anti-poverty programs is that it is, we construct these elaborate bureaucracies to try to separate these two groups of people from each other, and then it costs a lot of money in order to operate those bureaucracies. So, when we require people to, qualify or submit new paperwork every year or multiple times a year to prove that, no, in fact, they still qualify for these programs, or, when we're talking about work requirements, we require people to show that you're in a job training program or that you're actually looking for work even if you don't.
Thanks for listening. For more Off Kilter, find us on the Progressive Voices Network and as a podcast on iTunes. Follow us on Twitter at Off Kilter Show and at Facebook.com/Off Kilter Show.
This is the Randi Rhodes Show. To speak with Randi, dial 561-270-3844. That's 561-270-3844.
You've got Russia.
No, Russia's got you, is what happened there. Okay, so there's been another indictment today. I don't know how this plays in Mueller's mind, but I can tell you that right after the announcement that there were 13, Russian nationals and 3 Russian companies that were, indicted for interference in the 2016 presidential election, there was another indictment that came down against a guy named Richard Pinedo of Santa Paula, California. This indictment says that he sold bank account numbers created using the stolen identities of U.S. citizens to people or entities outside the United States. The Russian groups indicated by Mueller that used social media posts, online ads, and rallies in the U.S. to create the propaganda, primarily to communicate the derogatory information about Hillary and, to denigrate all the the primary candidates, right? It was Marco Rubio and all that crap too, and Ted Cruz. According to Mueller's other indictment released Friday, Pinedo's charges appear related to that activity. So I was just reading through the indictment, and it looks like he entered into a plea deal because the defendant accepted the statement offered by Mueller saying that he did sell people's bank account numbers and stole their identities and sold them to Russians. And he actually accepts this statement as true, and it's dated today. His signature's on it, Richard Pinedo, defendant, and it's signed by his attorney as well. It says the preceding statement is a summary made for the purpose of providing the court with a factual basis for my guilty plea to the charge against me. It does not include all of the facts known to me regarding the offense. I make this statement knowingly and voluntarily, blah, blah, blah. I read every word of the statement, and he signs it. The indictment says, pursuant to the rule, number one, from approximately 2014 through December 2017, the defendant, Richard Pinedo, operated an online service called Auction Assistance. Through Auction, and it's with an E, Auction Assistance, Pinedo offered a variety of services designed to circumvent the security features of large online digital payment companies, including a large digital payments company hereinafter referred to as Company One. Well, if I'm reading the indictment, prior to this indictment, there's a lot of talking here about PayPal. Pinedo sold bank account numbers through interstate and foreign commerce, specifically over the internet. Pinedo obtained bank account numbers either by registering accounts in his own name or by purchasing accounts in the names of other people through the internet. Many of the bank accounts purchased by Pinedo over the internet were created using stolen identities of U.S. persons. Although Pinedo was not directly involved in the registration of these accounts using stolen identities, he willfully, intentionally avoided learning about the use of stolen identities. Sounds to me like he was the go-between. He was the guy that was providing the Russians with the stolen identities under which they would create what looked like American accounts on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, but were really Russians using stolen American identities. And it looks like this guy in Santa Paula was in the business of stealing identities and selling them to the Russians. Tom in San Bruno, California.
Yeah, Randy, I heard about the Russians getting indicted. I don't know if they're going to be. I don't think they're going to get brought back here. I think Putin's going to keep them over there. This is really getting interesting because if we can get the House back, I'm going to be calling Nancy's office for articles of impeachment. This is getting serious, and I got to draft a letter to Kamala Harris expressing my concerns. I know she's very concerned. She's very busy right now. I mean, and Congress sitting on their hands, especially after the shooting in your neck of the woods when they were confronted about that. Well, what about gun control? Oh, it's not time to talk about it. They're totally in the hands. The whole Republican machine is in the hands of the NRA, and to me, they're nothing but a terrorist organization. They just don't want to admit it. You got half this country with a bunch of gun nuts.
Well, you really don't. You know, less than 40% of Americans live in a house with a gun. It's truly less than 40%, and those people stockpile them. So, so that's why what you get in America is 80% or better wanting background checks, and only a third of the country screaming about Second Amendment crap, and it is crap because, as you know, before 1977, the Supreme Court always found that the militia clause, meaning a well-regulated militia being necessary for the preservation of a free state, the right of the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed. The court, up until 1977, had always found that the National Guard was the well-regulated militia and that the militia clause trumped the right to keep and bear arms clause. And it wasn't until the crazy-ass people took over the NRA and started to, work to convince the Republicans that they needed to find crazy-ass, justices like Scalia, who would, twist the law around in his head. Except even Scalia couldn't come up with a rationale for people owning, rocket-propelled grenade launchers, right? So, right, right. So, even Scalia couldn't find a reason for people to own assault weapons. So that's why the assault weapons ban was allowed and it was constitutional, but handguns, no. That was Scalia, the Heller case. That was the very first time in the history of the Constitution, in the history of the United States, that the Supreme Court ever found that the National Guard wasn't the well-regulated militia and that people had a right to keep and bear arms individually. Up until 1977, 1980, we never had that. The Supreme Court never, ever, ever said the Second Amendment gives an individual the right.
That's at least 30 or 40% stockpiling these guns.
They started working. You know who actually started working on this, in earnest in 1980 when Reagan became president? Just look no further than our friend Orrin Hatch.
Oh, my God, Orrin Hatch.
Yeah.
A fine Mormon gentleman, which to me, a lot of the Mormons and people of faith, a certain percentage of them are hypocrites, and he fits the mold of a hypocrite.
Well, you know who's running for his seat now? Mitt Romney announced today he's running.
Oh my God!
Now remember, Mitt Romney. First he called Trump a fraud. Remember, he gave that wonderful. Yeah. And then, what did he do? He went to Trump Tower to audition.
Yeah, I went to the dinner with him. I would have never gone with.
Right. He went out to dinner where they had frog's legs or some such crap. And he was wanting to be the Secretary of State, so he kissed Trump's fat freaking ass all over the place. And then he went to interview at Bedminster and came out after Bedminster and said all these wonderful things about Trump, what a great guy he is and what interesting ideas he had. So they're all frauds. They're all fakes. But back to Orrin. Orrin Hatch became the chairman of the Senate Judiciary Committee in 1980. And he was the first one to commission crazy people to try and twist the Second Amendment, to say something other than what it says. And the NRA decided that they would work with Orrin Hatch, and they started to commission these crazy-ass people to write these freaking diatribes about how the and these are the originalists, right?
Right.
And now they twist the Constitution to say, oh, no, a well-regulated militia isn't necessary. Individuals simply have a right to keep and bear arms.
Well, I know. Well, a lot of these gun nuts, they wouldn't make it into the U.S. military. because you got to do more than shoot guns. You got to maintain height and weight standards, and you got to show a leadership proficiency in the NCO schools and officer schools, and a lot of them wouldn't even. A lot of times, I remember that guy in Utah that shot that poor congresswoman. He was trying to go into the military.
Arizona,
and the recruiter says, "I'm sorry, I'm not even going to send you to the physical. Please leave the door."
Right, Gabby Giffords, it was. Yeah, and that's the thing. Gabby Giffords was shot in the face. Steve Scalise was shot in the hip. They don't give a rat's ass about anything but the millions and millions of dollars that give them millions and millions of reasons to turn the Constitution on its freaking head. Because the Constitution, seriously, always said that the militia clause trumps the individual right to keep and bear arms clause, because it is a provisional amendment. It says, a well-regulated militia being necessary to the preservation of a free state. Well, that clause is met, meaning the National Guard in everybody's state is what preserves a free state from the federal government's over incursion. And once you have a militia, a well-regulated militia, which is the National Guard, you don't have an individual right to keep and bear arms. And the only difference between us and every other society, which all experience mental illness, which all experience, political upheaval and political discourse that, is trying and frustrating, is the amount of guns. We are 4.4% of the world's population, and yet we own 42% of the world's guns. And those guns are in less than 40% of America's homes, which tells you have less than 40% of America stockpiling freaking weapons because they think they're the militia.
Oh, God.
Yeah, and that's what's dangerous.
That's what's
so
dangerous.
Flip the House, flip the Senate. Do it.
Well, I'm gonna work hard this year, and I'm gonna write a letter to Kamala Harris. I met her a couple of times at our union luncheon. We have a luncheon every year at our union hall, and she used to come all the time, but she hasn't been able to come the last couple of our big luncheons, our get-together at our hall, because she's so busy.
Yeah.
Especially since she's been elected to the U.S. Senate, and she's one fighting lady. Don't get on the bad side of her. When she was Attorney General here in California, she reamed the bankers a new one.
Yeah.
Oh, did she ream them a new one?
She's. I mean, listen, there are bad Democrats, but she is not one of them. There are great Democrats. She is. And there are no great Republicans. There just aren't. When you see the entire Republican Party saying now is not the time, while these kids are on the TV saying, what do you mean now is not the time? The time is right now. In fact, it's almost too late for us, but not for other kids. The time is now. We were talking about gun control while we were hiding in the closet.
Yeah, right. Right in the closet.
In the closet. They were talking about, I swear to God, that's, this is just, here's Paul Ryan.
First, we don't know all the facts that one needs to know. What was the motivation? What was behind this? What laws were broken if they were beforehand? So there's just more questions than answers, I'd say, at this stage. But before I even say that, it's just a horrific, horrible shooting. I mean, I think we need to pray, and then our hearts go out to these victims. And I think as public policy makers, we don't just knee-jerk before we even have all the facts and the data.
Bite me. Okay, and then Marco Rubio.
Some of your colleagues in the Senate here from Washington, D.C. have already been trying to make this about policy and about gun control. Is this the appropriate time to be doing that?
It's not, only because people don't know how this happened. I mean, who this person is, what motivated them, how did they get a hold of the weapon that they used for this?
We do know. And here's just about where's everybody else? Where's everybody else? 11. Thank you.
It's entirely premature to be discussing about legislative solutions, if any.
It's just not the time to dive into the politics and try to score political points.
I think anybody who would politicize this shooting should be ashamed of themselves.
This is not the time to have the discussion, and it's frankly, I think, insulting to the American public right now to try to politicize something.
The reaction of Democrats to any tragedy is to try to politicize it.
I'm more than happy to talk about this in a few days. Right now is not the time.
There's a time and place for a political debate, but now is the time to unite as a country.
This isn't a guns situation. I mean, we could go into it, but it's a little bit soon to go into it.
Too soon. It's too soon, everybody. That's another way of saying never. That's another way of saying never. The kids had their vigil last night, I gotta say. And you know what they were chanting? No more guns. Here they are.
No more guns! 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 No more guns!
I think now is the time. I think they want to talk about it now. I mean, you could call me, clairvoyant or something, but something tells me they want to talk about no more guns now. I don't know. I mean, when I see them on the TV saying, we were talking about gun control while we were hiding in the closet because we know these guns have got to come out of our society. We know that we weren't afraid of this kid before, but when he had the gun, we were. Buy a stinking podcast. Go to RandiRhodes.com for the whole thing and a podcast. Buy a stinking podcast.